July 8, 1593. The city Rome breathes in marble, in shadow, in ambition. And somewhere within it, a child is born. Artemisia Gentileschi, oldest daughter of her parents. Her father, Orazio Gentileschi, a respected Tuscan artist. And her mother, Prudencia di Ottaviano Montoni. Her mother died in 1605 when Artemisia was only 12 years old. So Artemisia doesn't grow up in a warm home filled with laughter. She's raised by her father and grows up in a studio, where the air smells of oil and turpentine, where light cuts through high windows and lands on unfinished saints, where silence is broken only by the drag of a brush and the quiet watching of a young girl. She doesn't just see the paintings, she studies them, memorizes them, feels them. Stains her fingers, her curiosity, uncontrollable. Because while other children are taught how to behave, Artemisia is learning how to create. Her father is influenced by a man already becoming legend, Caravaggio. A painter not of perfection, but of truth. Of dirt beneath fingernails. Of blood that looks like blood. Of faces that feel real. Artemisia doesn't just learn his style, she absorbs it. Because for Artemisia, painting isn't decoration. It's truth, and truth is rarely gentle. By the time Artemisia is a teenager, she's not just helping around the studio anymore, she's actually painting. Around 1610, when she's just 17, she painted Susanna and the Elders. Now, this was actually a really common subject at the time. A biblical story about a married woman named Susanna who's bathing in her garden and is being harassed by two older men. A lot of artists painted this scene. However, other artists usually paint Susanna as unaware of the peeping or even inviting it. But Artemisia's Susanna looks uncomfortable, like genuinely uncomfortable, depicting Susanna rejecting the attention. She's turned away from the men, her body kind of folding in on itself, like she's trying to escape the situation. Unfortunately, this unwanted attention from older men was also depicted in her own life just a year later. Agostino Tassi, a painter hired by her father and trusted colleague, raped Artemisia. By Artemisia's own account later, he pushes her into a room and corners her. She fights back, she screams, she even tries to scratch his face. At one point, she even reaches for a knife, but he overpowers her. After the event, he promises to marry her, which was the quote-unquote punishment for raping a woman. That promise carries real weight in their society, where a woman's honor is tied directly to her ability to marry. Marriage, in cases like this, could restore her social standing after such an act. He continues to visit her, and their relationship goes on, but only because she believes that promise will be fulfilled. Tassi strung along Artemisia and her father for 9 months of promises, but he never followed through. So Artemisia took Tassi to trial and testified publicly, which at the time was rare for women to do. The trial is held in Rome under the authority of the papal courts. Magistrates appointed by the papal legal system presides, men of law and church authority. Their role is not emotional justice. It's establish truth, protect social order, determine credibility. Before Artemisia even speaks fully, her character is attacked. As part of Tassi's defense, he claims she was sexually experienced, suggests she was promiscuous, tries to frame the relationship as consensual witnesses are brought in. Neighbors, acquaintances, people who speculate on her behavior. At the same time, something shocking emerges. Tassi's past. He had previously tried to murder his wife. He had raped or attempted to rape his sister-in-law. He had a reputation for deception. This weakens his credibility, but doesn't end the case. When Artemisia finally speaks, her account is clear, direct, and unshaken. She describes being alone in the house when Tassi enters. She recounts how he forces himself on her. She tells of her resistance, how she fought back physically and desperately. She makes it clear that he used force to overpower her. One of her words is preserved in the record. He threw me on the bed, he forced me, I scratched his face. She even describes grabbing a knife and trying to stab him in the struggle. Then she explains why she stayed afterward. Because he promised marriage. Because she believed that promise could restore her honor. Across multiple sessions, her story never changes. And that consistency will matter. Then we reach the part that shocks most people. Artemisia is tortured while being questioned. But why torture her at all? In this legal system, torture is used to test whether someone is telling the truth, especially in cases like this, where testimony is central and fiercely contested. The logic, deeply flawed but accepted at the time, is simple. If you are telling the truth, your story will not change, even under pain. The method used on her is called the Sibyl. Cords or metal bands are wrapped tightly around her fingers. They are slowly tightened, crushing bone, damaging nerves. For an artist, this is not just pain, it is the threat of losing everything. As the screws tighten, she repeats her accusation. At one point, she cries out directly to Tassi, "È vero, è vero, è vero." It is true, it is true, it is true. And the line that defines her, "This is the ring you give me, and these are your promises." She is essentially saying, this pain, this is what your promise of marriage turned into. She does not change her story, which is a key detail. That consistency under torture becomes one of the strongest pieces of evidence in her favor. During the trial, Tassi maintains his position without hesitation. He continues to deny the rape. He insists the relationship was consensual. He attempts to discredit Artemisia at every turn. But his story begins to unravel. He lies, again and again. He contradicts himself. Witnesses step forward, and his claims start to fall apart. And through all of it, he shows little to no remorse. Orazio is not passive in any of this. He pushes the case forward with urgency. He gives his own testimony. He brings in witnesses to support the accusation. But his motivations are not simple. Yes, he is seeking justice for his daughter, but he is also fighting for the family's honor, for their reputation. In many ways, this trial is not only about her trauma, it is also about his standing in the world. The judges in this case are not thinking the way a modern court would. They are not asking, what did she go through? They want to know whether Artemisia was a virgin before the assault, because in their world, that determines the value of what was taken. They question whether she was truly forced, or whether this could be framed as consent after the fact. They examine the promise of marriage, because under Roman law, that promise could transform the entire case. And they study Tassi himself, his status, his credibility, his usefulness. The goal is not healing, it is order. To assign blame in a way that preserves social structure, to protect reputation, hierarchy, and norms. Artemisia's suffering exists in the room, but it is not the center of it. Outside the courtroom, people are watching. Cases like this draw attention, especially in a city like Rome, where reputation travels quickly. The general attitude is not on her side. There is deep skepticism toward women's accusations. An obsession with sexual purity overrides any real concern for trauma. Sympathy, when it exists at all, is tied to whether her honor can still be salvaged, not what she endured. And yet, Artemisia's case begins to stand out. Because she does not back down. Because she endures torture and does not change her story. Because Tassi is already known. Whispers of deceit, past accusations, a reputation that isn't clean. Bit by bit, attention shifts. Not fully in her favor, but enough that this is no longer just another case. After roughly 7 months, the trial finally comes to an end. The proceedings have dragged on through testimonies, contradictions, and public scrutiny. In the end, Tassi is found guilty. The court issues its sentence, exile from Rome, typically set at around 5 years. On paper, it sounds decisive, a formal judgment, a consequence. But the reality is far less satisfying. The sentence is barely enforced. Tassi does not meaningfully serve the punishment. And just like that, after everything she endured, the testimony, the pressure, the torture, the outcome lands with far less weight than it should. Immediately after the trial, when she's 19, Artemisia is married off to a man named Pierantonio Stiatesi, a fellow artist. Once wed, they leave Rome for Florence, Pierantonio's hometown. Florence offers distance, but more importantly, it offers opportunity. This is where she first learned to read and write. In Florence, she became the first woman accepted in Accademia delle Arti del Disegno, or the Academy of Art and Drawing, one of the most prestigious art institutions in Europe. There she gained patronage from Cosimo II de' Medici, the Duke of Tuscany, and Duchess Christina of Lorraine. This changed everything for her. Because patronage meant financial independence, high-status commissions and contracts without her husband's permission, and access to elite networks. While there, she still dealt with small tragedies. During her 8 years in Florence, she had 5 children, possibly more, but most in less than a year of birth died, likely due to illnesses like fevers, infections, respiratory diseases, complications during or after birth, or just general lack of medical knowledge. Infant and child mortality was extremely high in the 1600s. One son passed away before turning 5. Only one child is clearly known to have survived into adulthood, Prudencia. But even details about her life are limited. Regardless, she continued her passion through the losses. When you look at a painting by Artemisia Gentileschi, it doesn't feel distant. It feels close, immediate, like you walked in at the worst possible moment. That's not accidental. She paints in a world shaped by Caravaggio, a world of deep shadows and violent light. She delivers in her second iteration of Judith slaying Holofernes, finished in 1620. This painting isn't subtle. It's not symbolic. It's physical. In the painting, Judith and her servant aren't hesitating. They are committed. They hold him down. They finish the act. Blood is not implied. It's not stylized. It's present and real. And what makes it different from other versions of this story is this. There's no distance between the women and what they're doing. No fear, no softness, just control. And then something different. Self-portrait as the allegory of painting. This one matters, because she's not painting a character, she's painting herself as painting itself. Not a muse, not a subject. The act of creation. She places herself mid-motion, brush in hand, body twisted toward the canvas, hair loose, sleeves rolled. It's not posed. It's working. She's saying, without saying it, I am not the subject of art. I am the one who makes it. After Florence, she doesn't stay still. She moves. Back to Rome, then to Venice, then to Naples. Each place leaves a mark on how she paints. She returns again and again to certain types of stories. Women in moments of pressure. Women being watched, judged, threatened. Women taking action. Not because she can't paint anything else, but because she's choosing to. Look at Mary Magdalene as melancholy. This isn't a decorative saint. Mary sits heavy, inward, reflective, not idealized, human. Or Jael and Sisera again, violence, but not spectacle. It's focused, intentional, close. It's easy and honestly lazy to say, she paints like this because of what happened to her. That's part of it, but it's not the whole truth. She paints this way because she was trained in a system dominated by men and mastered it. She absorbed Caravaggio's realism and pushed it further. She lived through things that made her understand power, vulnerability, consequence. And instead of painting distance, she paints experience. Her work doesn't ask you to admire it from afar. It pulls you in and makes you deal with it. Some artists chase beauty. Some chase stories people already know. But Artemisia Gentileschi does something harder. She paints what it feels like to endure something and not disappear after.